Hi, I'm Joel Richardson, and this is The Underground. Welcome to this week's episode of The Underground, a program that explores the testimony of the biblical prophets, the gospel of Jesus Christ, current events, and how all of these things relate to you and me. Now, in this week's episode, I want to come back to the issue of Syria and the Kurds and Turkey and President Trump's decision to withdraw troops from Syrian Kurdistan or the Syrian Kurdish regions, the Turkish invasion, all of these things. And I'm just going to shoot from the hip. I really don't have a script. But I just want to say, because I got a bit of some reverb from mentioning it in the prior program, and this is something that really has been weighing heavily on my heart. Now, again, when I say this, I'm going to lose people on both sides, but I'm going to say it anyway. From the beginning of the election of President Trump, I have largely supported, overwhelmingly, again, 99% of his decisions. I have been a Trump supporter. I've been tremendously grateful for a lot of the things that he's done, and we all owe him a big thanks. Again, for moving the embassy, the American embassy to Jerusalem, for taking that stand. The whole world said, the whole world's going to blow up, the whole Middle East is going to go crazy. He did it, and nothing happened. We're grateful to President Trump for working to free Pastor Andrew Brunson from Turkey, who had been, in prison for a few years. I mean, that was a tremendously painful time for him to endure, and President Trump went to bat for him, again, along with Vice President Pence and the larger Trump administration. We're tremendously grateful for that. Look, there's numerous things that he has done in terms of foreign policy that we all, again, I don't care if you hate Trump or if you love him, regardless, we owe him a big thanks for this. He has done the right thing in a lot of cases, and I'm blessed that he is getting in some conservative judges. As a conservative, as someone who's pro-life, I'm thrilled that he's doing this. However, on this recent decision to pull back troops out of Syria, out of the Kurdish regions of Syria, as well as several of his statements that he has made subsequently in defending his position, I have been in deep, deep disagreement with him. And in my opinion, as followers of Jesus, we all should. And again, I'm not going to, try to get into a grand overview of the whole topic. But let me just say this. The Kurds have been the friends of America. They have been our friends. The Kurdish people, if you think about this, there are roughly 50 million Kurds between Turkey, Syria, Iraq, and Iran. Now, you have about 22 million people in the country of Australia. Okay, so there are well over twice as many people, Kurds, as there are Australians. Okay, that's a substantial number of people, and they don't have their own country. They have been broken up, again, years ago because of the Sykes-Picot, all of these different treaties and things that sort of unfolded after World War I, World War II, has resulted in them being divided and divided between four different countries, and they've always been oppressed. I mean, they've been oppressed for so long, but they've largely found themselves sandwiched between two empires, between, we'll just say today, Turkey and Iran. You step back a bit in history, and it was the Ottomans and the Safavids. You step back a bit more, it was the Byzantines and the Sassanids, and then Rome and the Parthians, and then Alexander the Great and the Medo-Persians, of which arguably the Kurds are largely descendants of the Medes. So this thing goes back for thousands of years. And then, of course, the Arabs, just to their south, as after the 7th century, as Islam burst forth throughout the region, the Kurds have found themselves, the ethnic people, the Kurdish people, different than the Turks, different than the Persians, different than the Arabs. The Kurds have found themselves sandwiched really between, you could even say, these three empires. And unfortunately, they've largely been mistreated by all three peoples, particularly Turkey and the Persians, Turkey and the Fars or the Iranians. And, you know, I've heard a lot of cliches. I've heard a lot of cliches the past couple of weeks since Trump's decision from my own side, from those that are conservative. Now, as a conservative, let me say this. I don't expect much from the left. You know, I don't expect, forgive me, but I don't expect a tremendous amount of rational, logical, reasonable discourse from the left. However, when I see incredibly irrational, unreasonable, just un-Christ-like, very uncompassionate statements coming from my own side, particularly those that are Christians, it really, really grieves me. So, for instance, it used to be, and really there's been quite a change, I think, in the United States the past several years, where a large segment of conservatives, and this really kind of came to a head during the whole period of the Tea Party. And, you know, the Tea Party, if you're not part of the Tea Party, the more isolationist, libertarian conservatives, they would refer to all of the other conservatives as neocons, warmongers, hawks, and, you know, puppets, and, you know, this type of thing. So there's really been a fracture among American conservatives. But there's been this transition where it used to be, if you were a Christian, if you were conservative, and let's say, you know, a young man, a solid young guy grows up and joins the Army or the Marines or the Navy, whatever, he joins the military, people would say what he is doing is right, especially shortly after 9/11. He is defending his country. He's doing the noble thing. He's risking his life in order to protect freedom and liberty. And this was largely the discourse that you would hear from, again, American conservatives, particularly Christians, you know, because I'm proud to be an American, because, you know, and we would sing this in church, these very patriotic anthems and so forth. And I think there's a tremendous amount of godliness there. Although I think as the wars wore on for years, and we continued to lose well over 4,000 men and women service members between Iraq and Afghanistan, then we looked and we saw the results, the fruit that really wasn't very good. We started reconsidering a lot of this and saying, well, perhaps a lot of these wars are not necessary. Perhaps we need to be thinking a bit more about walking humbly, yes, carrying a big stick, but not necessarily jumping into being the police of the world and this sort of thing. We need to put America first and think of our own men and women, our own children first, and stop putting our own children on the altar of being global police and, you know, all these different things. And you know, I'll say, you know, kind of the Alex Jones crowd and that voice has sort of gotten in there and really influenced a lot of the more libertarian thought, as well as folks like Ron Paul and then his son Rand Paul. And so a much more isolationist American foreign policy has emerged. Okay, so here's the cliche that I've been hearing a lot lately, is essentially what I just articulated, what I just said, which is end these endless wars. And I've heard this from Trump, and of course I've heard it from his supporters. We need to end these endless wars. Okay, now let me debunk that particular cliche as it applies to this particular situation. We're not talking about Afghanistan. We're not talking about Iraq. We're not talking about an ongoing war. What we're talking about is an incredibly cost-effective, and when I say cost-effective, I mean both in terms of finances and American lives. Now you go, one American life is too much. Yes. However, when you have less Americans dying in Syria than they would if they were simply home on some American base just due to accidents, then the argument really falls apart. Over the past several years, we've lost, really since ISIS exploded and swept through Raqqa and Mosul in Iraq, and Raqqa in Syria and Mosul in Iraq. Since ISIS exploded in June of 2014, up until so now we're here, more than 5 years later, we've lost 6 American service members, I believe all men, I could be wrong, in Syria. Okay, in the Kurdish regions of Syria, 6. Now, again, that's a lower number than the amount of people, servicemen, that would just die by accidents. Okay, and in fact, a handful of the deaths were just accidents. I say a handful. Some of them were. I don't know the exact numbers in terms of combat and that sort of thing. But here's the point, guys. This is not a war. So when you say stop the endless wars, it's not a war. We had a minimal number of peacekeeping special forces there in the Rojava, which is the Kurdish regions of Syria, whereas our friends, the Kurds, gave well over 11,000 lives. And what did they give it for? They gave it for our interests, our benefits, American interests, which is the destruction of ISIS, okay, in Syria. They fought valiantly, and they were our friends, they were our allies. Not just our allies like realpolitik, well, they serve us well. They've been our friends. And we've made promises and we've made agreements to them that by pulling troops out, and the issue was not simply pulling our troops out, it was green-lighting Turkey to invade. And some people say, well, Trump didn't do that. He did. I can put up tweets where he said, Turkey and the Kurds have been fighting forever. Let them do it. This kind of thing. He actually tweeted inferring that the Kurds are worse terrorists than ISIS. And, again, Mr. Trump, we love you. Mr. President, we love you. We are thankful for so many of the things that you've done. But that is a lie. It's a disgusting lie. I've seen very well-educated commentators, make the comment that the Kurds are terrorists and this sort of thing. And, the PKK is a designated terrorist group. Now, what is the PKK? As a side note, it's an organization. It's not all the Kurds, but it's an organization largely in Turkey, as well as in the Kandil Mountains there in Iraq. The Kurdish Workers' Party, Partisi, PKK is the English acronym, that has engaged in, we'll say, terrorist activity, or, one man's terrorist is another man's freedom fighter. But let's just put this in perspective, okay? Because it's easy to think, when you think terrorist, just to think ISIS. The Kurds are not ISIS. They're not beheading and raping and doing all of these things. They have committed some atrocities. I want to be very clear. I'm not ignorant of the whole history here. I'm actually very conversant with all of the complexity and the history of what has unfolded here. And so this is another cliche. Well, they're terrorists. To put this in perspective, over the past, I don't know how many years, let's just say over the past, since 1984 is really when the PKK was formed. So we're dealing with over the past 33 years. The Kurds the PKK has killed about 3,000 people. And some of them were innocent civilians, okay? But the majority of them were soldiers. The overwhelming majority of that 3,000 were soldiers, okay? That's war. That's not terror. Terror is when you just randomly kill civilians. Okay, now 3,000, mostly Turks, were killed. Over 4,000 Kurdish villages have been destroyed by Turkey. Okay, now again, I'm not justifying terrorism, but to a degree, I am. If I were, a people group, if you and I were a people group who were being systematically exterminated by some government, if our parents, if our children, if our grandparents, if our neighbors, if our friends were being killed and singled out simply because of who they are, whether it be a Christian, whether it be their ethnicity, it would be awfully difficult, even as a Christian, not to become a freedom fighter. Genuinely. 4,000 Kurdish villages have been destroyed by largely the AKP party, the Islamist Turkish party that has been in power under the leadership of Erdogan. Turkey today, again, this is another cliche. People will say, well, Turkey is a NATO ally. They're our ally. And I go, yeah, on paper only. Any claim that Turkey is still our ally is delusional. Look, this is the country. This is the president that came to the United States twice, and he'll be here in a week or so. He'll be here early November. On his last 2 visits, both times, his security men attacked American citizens brazenly, kicking people in the head. I mean, sending people to the hospital, choking a woman nearly to death. Right there in Washington, D.C., in front of reporters, in front of the police, no one doing anything of it because of diplomatic immunity, blah, blah, blah. And you can watch the video where the president commanded his men to go attack American Kurdish citizens who were peacefully protesting, doing what all Americans have the right to do, which is to protest a dictator on American soil. And his men violently, physically attacked, shamed the United States on our soil, and we did largely nothing about it. We did almost nothing about it. There was no statement from the president, from the White House condemning what happened. We turned a blind eye. Turkey today is the largest jailer of journalists in the world, more than Iran, more than China, more than North Korea. Any of these combined, Turkey has taken over, the government itself owns, I believe it's 28 of the 29 media institutions in Turkey. They have all been taken over. Guys, don't anyone tell me that Erdogan is not a dictator. People say, well, he's elected. He's still subject to democracy, so therefore he's not technically a dictator. Open up the dictionary and look at the definition of dictator. It is someone who is in power outside of the democratic process, or someone who behaves as if they are, who behaves like a dictator. Erdogan behaves like a dictator. The only thing that is keeping Erdogan from being a complete dictator, by the way, he's been in power since 2002, so for the past 17 years, and he plans on being in power for quite some more time. That's not just someone who comes in with a few-year term limit. He's been in power for over 17 years now. He's been either the prime minister or the president, and he has systematically worked to dismantle Kemalism. This is the point. The only thing that is keeping him from being a complete dictator is the very system that Ataturk put in place, that Mustafa Kemal Ataturk, Kemalism, put in place, the system of checks and balances. And this is the system that Erdogan has been systematically working to dismantle, to destroy, in order that he can do whatever he wants. Believe me, he is the one that made the statement that democracy is like a streetcar. You get on it until it gets you where you want to get, and then you get off. Okay, he made that statement, and he has proven that to be true. The canary in the coal mine for any emerging dictatorship is always the journalists, is always the media. He has taken over the media. He has completely placed all of his people throughout the judiciary, the judges. He has beheaded the military branches and put in his own people. He has taken over the parliament, the prime minister, the presidency, all of these things. And yes, he still has to go through some elections because he hasn't been able to completely dismantle Kemalism yet. But believe me, he has been working diligently to do so. Okay, well, but he's still an ally. Look, Turkey is an incredibly geostrategically important piece of property. Asia Minor is an incredibly important piece of property. And yes, I understand we have nuclear weapons. We have a military base there at the Incirlik Air Force Base there in central eastern Turkey. We need to be wise about that. But guys, here's the point, is Turkey has not been our ally for at least 10 years now. And it is high time that American politicians wake up and recognize that and begin making moves to phase out our military and political alliance with Turkey. We have lost Turkey. Turkey has become Pakistan. And you go, but they're too strategic. We have to be wise. Yes, absolutely, we have to be wise. But we need to stop pretending that Turkey is our ally, even when they are in the actual act of trying to commit genocide and ethnic cleansing of our friends. Let me address another cliche. It's a cliche that I hear. Well, people say, but they're not our friends. The Kurds are not our friends. They're communists. the history of the Kurdistan Workers' Party and the YPG, which is connected to the PKK in Syria, the history of the political movement and the military wing of the Kurds in Syria, is one that did start with a lot of radical revolutionary socialism and communist ideology. Öcalan is sort of the spiritual father or the ideological father of the movement. He's been in prison since, I think, 1992. He began incredibly radical, but here's the thing. We can't just be reactionary. Well, we're capitalists, they're communists, they're our enemies, blah, blah, blah. Look, Israel started out largely as a very socialist and even communist-oriented entity with terrorists, by the way. You know, read the history of the establishment of the State of Israel. There were all kinds of Jewish terrorist organizations. There was all sorts of communist and socialist political ideology. Even to this day, Israel is still sort of a democratic socialist political arrangement, which is funny, by the way. Every election season, people say, you know, the conservatives, my people, we need someone who is going to be pro-Israel. You know, if they're not pro-Israel, we're not going to vote for them. And we need someone that's going to stand against socialism. And I go, but Israel is largely a democratic socialist political, functions under that political ideology. But again, they're moving much more toward democracy. But here's the point. So are the Kurds. In recent years, Öcalan has, and again, the Kurdish political philosophy has, because what was the acronym for those that are only, have a surface familiarity with all of this? What was the acronym for the group that we were partnering with? It was the SDF, the Syrian Democratic Forces or Party. They have moderated much more. Yes, they're still much more libertarian and socialist than we in the United States would be. But the point is this, they are far and away the entity that aligns with our values, American values of freedom, of equality, of protecting minorities than any other group in the Middle East, most certainly much greater than Turkey. Okay, so here's the point. If you want to throw, at me, say, well, they're communists because Jack Prosebiak, whatever, he retweeted some Antifa group. There was like 4 guys that went over there and formed some party and tried to connect with some Kurds and made a video or something like that. Look, that's like some weird group that tried to create something. That does not define the Kurds. It's incredibly misleading. It's incredibly ignorant, to say it quite bluntly, to claim that the Kurds are all these radical communists. They're not. Just last week, I was blessed to meet with Ilham Ahmed, who is essentially the president of the Syrian Kurds right now. She is the president of the Executive Council of the Syrian Kurds and a woman of tremendous dignity. We just wrapped up just a few days ago the night of prayer for the Kurds. This is all online on FAI Facebook. You can go there and watch it. Dalton Thomas did a tremendous job in moderating and overseeing the night. We heard from Ilham Ahmed, the president. She spoke. Also some Kurdish American leaders, some young Kurdish American leaders. And it was a tremendous night. And I would encourage you to, it's a few hours. I would encourage you to go on Facebook and go back and watch all of that. And even have a watch party to go back and watch all of this. But so look, I've touched on a lot of the sort of political, history of all this. Again, imagine being a Kurd in Turkey where it is legal to speak your own language. Whereas if you simply hum a Kurdish song, you can be put in prison. Where in your own cities, when your leaders, your fathers, violate curfew and go out past 6 o'clock, during certain periods the past couple of years, the Turks were shooting people in the streets. Again, decimating, eliminating. This is called ethnic cleansing. And as Christians, and let me say this, as Christians, and now I want to touch on the spiritual side of it, our job is not to be blind followers of a political party or a political leader. Again, as I've said, I've largely been a supporter of President Trump. But if you're someone who can't say, I disagree with him on this point or some other point, then you are a member of the cult, right? If you can't disagree with anything, if you view him as this anointed man whose every decision he makes is perfect, then you're probably the member of a cult and not an independent thinker, not a follower of Jesus. As Paul said, if I'm trying to impress men, then I am no longer a servant of Christ. And again, I'm going to get in trouble for doing this video. For any disagreement with the president in any way, shape, or form, there will be people who will be very upset. Well, you must be a flaming liberal, Joel. No, far from it. I'm an incredibly conservative person, politically, ideologically, fiscally, morally, etc. But I am a follower of Christ first. I'm a Christian first, a conservative second, and as Mike Pence says, a Republican third. My support is for Jesus and what he has commanded me to do far before it is to be a follower of President Trump or supporter of President Trump. Okay, so let's touch on the spiritual side of it. You have a people who have been oppressed, who have been hated, who have been rejected, who have been the targets of ethnic cleansing and genocide. And Turkey, look, what they're trying to do right now is push the Kurds out of their ancient homeland and fill it with Syrian Arab refugees from Turkey. Where are they going to go? Since our decision to greenlight the invasion, there have been over 300,000 Kurds that have been displaced. That means forced out of their homes to become refugees in other parts of the world. There's no plan. Where are they going to go? To Iraqi Kurdistan? They're already breaking at the seams trying to take care of all the refugees from the ISIS years. It's a pre-state within a failed state. That's Iraq. They're barely able to handle that and add nearly another 500,000 people that they're supposed to take care of. So you've got about 1,000 people a day right now are pouring into Iraqi Kurdistan. FAI, Frontier Alliance International, we've actually got people right there meeting them, bringing in supplies and doing all of these things. If you want to donate to the convoys that are going in, then please go to FAImission.org and you can donate that way. We as followers of Jesus are to be those that stand with those who are being slaughtered, who are being oppressed, who are the targets of ethnic cleansing and genocide, especially when they're our friends, especially when they are people who have been protecting Christians. And by the way, there are various Christian wings of the YPG that are fighting alongside their Muslim Kurdish friends. And some of the Kurds are actually even atheists. I mean, a lot of them are atheists. They believe in radical gender equality, which is why, by the way, the president of the Executive Council of the Syrian Kurds is a woman. Name for me one other country in the Middle East where the president is a woman. And, some of us may be uncomfortable with that sort of egalitarian philosophy. But the point is this: they've been persecuted by the surrounding neighbors so much that the Islam that they practice is the kind of Islam that we want to see replicated throughout the Middle East, which is a very moderate, very tolerant form of Islam. The only, as I was sitting with the president in Washington, D.C., they pointed out her two assistants that were there were Christians. Okay, they pointed out the only open convert church in Syria is in Kobani, protected by the SDF, by the Syrian Democratic Forces, by the YPG. They know that these are former Muslim converts, and they have a church. They're not attacked. They're protected. These are the type of people that we want to get behind, not Turkey, that is putting journalists in jail, that keeps openly talking about wanting to expand the former Ottoman regions, how they got ripped off, and they deserve essentially all of the Kurdish regions. Because listen, once they're done with Syria, don't think for a second that Erdogan doesn't want to move right into Iraqi Kurdistan, because he does. And so the point is this: I'm wholeheartedly on board a supporter of the YPG. I'm a supporter of the PKK. People go, well, that's a terrorist organization. They have moderated in recent years, and the Kurds deserve a homeland of their own. They really do. I believe that one of the things that we as Christians with discernment of this hour, with an understanding of the geopolitics of the region, should be praying for is the establishment of an independent Kurdish state in the Middle East, of a declaration in the same way that President Trump had the chutzpah, had the guts to move the American embassy to Jerusalem, the Israeli-American embassy to Jerusalem. I believe that we need a leader that has the chutzpah to engage in a Balfour moment, to make a declaration, to the recognition of an independent Kurdish state. And it should start in Iraqi Kurdistan and include Syria and Kurdistan, I believe that there's time for us to turn back. And in fact, everything appears as if, despite all of the statements of the president, that cooler heads have prevailed because we're already moving troops back in. So if you say, well, it's better that we move troops out, we're not. We've already moved 500 new troops in to guard the oil wells, which is a result of the chaos that has erupted because of our green light of Turkey moving in. So there's 500 new troops that we've had to move in, and we're already bringing troops back into the Syrian regions. And I'm grateful that Congress passed a resolution pushing for sanctions on Turkey because, by the way, the president said, if Turkey invades, we will hit them with hard sanctions. And then we had Mike Pence and Pompeo came back and say they were in Turkey. We've worked out a ceasefire. There is no ceasefire. We have friends on the ground. We have people there that are reporting. Dave Eubanks, of a Christian, a strong evangelical Christian of the Free Burma Rangers, has been reporting every day. There is no ceasefire. It is a genocide zone. And yet our president's promise that he would engage in harsh sanctions on Turkey, he's not done it. We are not being told the truth. And so, regardless, you go, but I support President Trump and I disagree with you. And I go, fine. Why is he lying to us? Objectively lying to us. So look, guys, our job as evangelicals, as followers of Jesus, is to pray, Lord, turn the heart of our president to help him. All he has to do is acknowledge that he made a mistake. He did the wrong thing. We made a mistake, and now we're going to fix it. We're going to go back. We're going to stand with our friends. And ultimately, pray that the president, because as Dalton mentioned the other night at the Night of Prayer for the Kurds, if there's anyone that has the guts to buck against the world, to buck against the dictators, and to do what's right, and to declare a Kurdish independent state in the heart of the Middle East that will become America's greatest ally. And I'll say this will get me in trouble, it will become a second Israel in the region. And that's exactly what all the surrounding neighbors say. If the Kurds reestablish, it'll be like a second Israel, which is interesting that they use that language. And the Kurds, by the way, will become one of Israel's greatest allies in the region, and it will be a tremendously beneficial security reality for Israel and for the United States in the region. If there's anyone that has the guts to do it, it's President Donald J. Trump. And let's pray that the Lord would turn the heart of the king, so to speak, and that would give him wisdom, that he would do the right thing. And I say all of this with the utmost of respect, but I have to say, I have to be a servant of Christ. I have to speak the truth. And I do so as a conservative, political conservative, and as a conservative Christian as well. Now, all of this said, before I wrap it up, let me just say this. I believe it's in the spring. I don't know the exact dates off the top of my head. Dalton Thomas, FAI, Executive Director of FAI, and myself, we are leading a tour into Iraqi Kurdistan. It is going to be amazing. The deadline for signups is the end of the year. So we're actually coming up on the deadline here within the next couple months. It's a really reasonably priced tour. I think it's about $4,600. And again, that includes just about everything. We land in Erbil. And by the way, let me just say this for those that go, who wants to go to Iraq? It's safe, guys. It's incredibly safe. Iraqi Kurdistan is the Iraq that we've always wanted. We want the rest of Iraq to look like that. That's where, when there's unrest in Baghdad, everyone goes up to Erbil to flee to safety. It is completely stable, completely safe. It might sound scary going to Iraq. It's a beautiful place. It's in a lot of ways, there's a tremendous amount of biblical historical places there that have tremendous biblical relevance. So we'll go up there and actually spend a night in a very ancient Eastern Orthodox monastery up in the mountains. ISIS tried to shell it during the ISIS years. The Peshmerga, the Kurdish military, drove them back. We'll see the tomb of Nahum, the prophet, which is being restored as we speak. It's a really amazing place to be in northern Iraq and to see all of these plaques from the prophet Nahum in Hebrew that have been there for hundreds of years, and arguably a tomb that's been there for thousands of years. We'll visit the Genocide Museum, the Al-Anfal genocide, when Saddam Hussein gassed hundreds of thousands of Kurds. Again, you talk about a people that have been subject of hatred. We'll visit this. And all in all, you'll get a well-rounded time of understanding the region, the people, the Peshmerga, meeting with the generals, as well as Christian workers that are on the ground, teams that are there that are serving as missionaries, doing the work of the Lord, to get a vision for God's heart for the region. This is a tremendously pivotal and important, I believe, place right now in the unfolding divine strategy of what God's doing in the region. And I would really appeal to you to prayerfully consider coming with us to Iraqi Kurdistan. I believe it's in March, the end of March, beginning of April sounds right. Again, I might have it wrong. But I'll put up the link on the screen here for you to click through, and if you go to the bottom of the YouTube page, we'll have the links there as well. It's legacy tours, but presently we're partnering with Living Passages. So Living Passages is the agency, the travel company that it puts it all together. But we have formed, Dalton and I and Marco Moreno, retired Lieutenant Colonel Marco Moreno of the Israeli IDF, we formed this thing called Legacy Tours. So we're doing a tour to Israel in the fall 2020, but we're also doing this trip to Iraqi Kurdistan in the spring. These are both part of Legacy Tours. So you can find the information either through the Legacy Tours website, and I'm not sure the exact address off the top of my head, as well as the Living Passages website. But as I said, I'll put it up on the screen. It's going to be an awesome time. It's going to be an amazing time to be up there in the Nineveh Plains, just to see this part of the world that has been the center of so much controversy and satanic rage throughout history and over the past few years, and which will continue to be such an incredibly important, as I said, geostrategically important place, spiritually, politically, militarily, in the days ahead. So again, it's an appeal, friends, ultimately, to stand with the Kurds, I just wanted to pour out my heart. If you'd like to donate to FAI, again, go to faimission.org. We're going to be sending in convoys of medical and all kinds of aid into Syria as this ongoing ethnic cleansing unfolds. It's already a nightmare. There's tremendous amount of work to be done. The work of the Lord, this is where the rubber meets the road. So we'll put up the links for that as well. Thanks for bearing with me. I do ask you to continue to pray for this situation and pray, that, as I said, that the Lord would turn the heart of the king, of the president in this case, and that in the United States that Congress and the Senate and the president would act, and that we would stand side by side, shoulder to shoulder with our friends. And this proverb, the Kurds have no friends of the mountains, would become a thing of the past, that the body of Christ and the American people would be known as the friends of the Kurds. So amen and amen. Thanks for being with us. I look forward to seeing you next time. Until then, I'm Joel Richardson, and this is The Underground.